Welcome to my takeoff and landing tutorial for the F-104 Starfighter mod. The F-104 is a tricky aircraft to handle, so tutorials like this need doing for sure. If you're like me and you don't pay too much attention to handling aircraft on the ground, the F-104 is definitely going to be a nasty surprise. Let's take a look at it. Looking at the F-104 from the outside, the reason that it's hard to handle on the ground is fairly obvious. Narrow track landing gear coupled with a powerful engine. This thing will flip over if you're not careful, and with that big J79 engine, it's really easy to taxi way too fast, and you will certainly flip over if you take a turn too fast. One thing that confused me initially is the way that the nose wheel steering button works, so while we're on that subject, let's go ahead and take a look at the controls we'll need. You'll need to make sure the pitch, yaw, roll, and thrust axes are set up, of course, and we'll also need the landing gear control, the nose wheel steering button, the brakes, and the drag chute controls, as well as the flaps. Now, most of this I've just left default, but the nose wheel steering button I've bound to the Z key on my keyboard so that it is handy because you have to be able to hold that thing down while you're taxiing. It only works when you hold it down. It's not something that you just push to turn on and push again to turn off. It also locks the nose wheel in whatever position it was in when you depress the button, so make sure to return the rudder to center before you release the nose wheel steering button. With that out of the way, let's taxi to the runway and take off. The hard part here is going to be getting to the runway because the narrow track landing gear make this thing prone to flipping over. Be very careful not to taxi too fast because it's easy to do with this powerful engine in a relatively light and aerodynamic aircraft. As we go into the turn here, I'll press and hold the nose wheel steering button and use the twist grip rudder control on my joystick to steer. Once I've completed the turn, I'll let the twist grip return to center before releasing the nose wheel steering key. Now that we're onto the runway, it's time for the easy part, but don't relax too much because look at those tiny wings. Those have to move very fast to generate enough lift for this thing to take off, so we're going to need a long takeoff roll. Full power is going to be essential for getting this thing off the ground, especially when loaded with ordnance, so I will first hold the brakes and go up to full afterburner. Don't even think about pulling up until you're 3/4 of the way down the runway because you're likely to tail strike. Takeoff speed is going to be at least 170 knots. When you do pull up, do it gradually because this is a very unforgiving aircraft. And we're up. I will note that the throttle has a detent that I don't completely understand, but if you push it all the way forward, for some reason it returns to the idle position, so be very careful of that. It has something to do with the taxiing functionality, the developers tell me. Climb at a fairly shallow angle until you get plenty of airspeed, and don't even think about maneuvering below about 200 knots. Now we'll do a complete circuit of the airstrip and line up for landing. Make sure to give yourself plenty of room to line up and land, and take the turns wide, because if you think pulling too hard on the stick in something like a Tomcat is bad, this thing is a lot worse, and we'll see more of that when we get into the dogfighting video coming up. Landing speed is also above 170 knots, so you'll need to land at a relatively high angle of attack in a high power setting. Also make sure to have deployed full flaps, and you will need to use the air brakes. And we're down again, but oh, we're back up. I'll deploy the drag chute, but oh, this thing is very hard to land. Controlling the descent is key here, and it's just something that I haven't mastered yet. So try not to do what I just did and make this thing basically crash and burn. I hope you found this tutorial helpful, and stick around for the next one. Thanks for watching.